pose like this.
Getting all set up for your first live ever on Instagram. No
Yeah.
big deal.
I'm gonna turn up the volume a little bit.
Okay.
Perfect. All right.
All right. So I'm just going to play the music for a short while to let people hop on. We're going to wait a little bit and then we'll dance in the meantime.
That's perfect.
Or shake it out, whatever you want to do. Love it. Woo.
Ooh, beautiful.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, here we go. So first off, thank you for everyone that joined. I want to introduce Julie. If you can step in and just do a quick intro, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, my name is Julie, and I'm the founder of Expansive Journey, and where I teach how to live in the present moment, and authenticity, which is today's topic, is a really huge part of that. As we move into presence and we start to take out the filters on life, and we start to experience life more raw and authentically. This is what we're being encouraged to do in this new time that we're in, many of us, and that's what we're here to talk about today. It's loading.
Oh, I'm back. The electricity went out for a moment.
Costa Rica.
Back up. I'm good. Yeah, Costa Rica, you know the Wi-Fi. Back up. All right. Did I miss something? You said it all?
Nope.
You got it all in,
Just waiting
everything
for
that
your
you wanted
connection
to? Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I live in Costa Rica, for all of you who don't know. So once in a while, the electricity will go off and then my data will pop on. But don't worry, I won't disconnect from the live entirely. All right. So authenticity, our topic today. And I wanted to start off with some things that we hear people say frequently. So we hear things like, just be yourself, know thyself. And, you know, I believe it's easier to say these things than to live them out. And so, like, what do those things even actually mean? And I feel it's important to get in depth as to what authenticity is. And so first off, what I did was I pulled up an online definition, and then a little bit later as we get into it, I'm going to go over what my definition of authenticity is as well. So I'd love to have you chime in as well on that. So here's the online definition that I pulled up. So put simply, authenticity means you're true to your own personality, values, and spirit, regardless of the pressure that you're under to act otherwise. You're honest with yourself and with others, and you take responsibility for your errors and judgment, and in times that you are behaving in a selfish way.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a broad one, but it's a good thing as well.
Yes.
Sounds simple, but it's something to live with it, you know, as it in a way, you know, express it. So yeah.
Okay. And what's your view on authenticity? Do you have a definition?
Yeah, I made a note about my definition, and I would say it's an act of living in truth and expressing or experiencing life as it is, without the pushing and pulling on reality. And includes also, I like the part of your definition about, like, it's also the integrity, like when you know that, oh, I feel guilt or I feel shame, I stand up for that, and I sort of like, it's a part of like facing the uncomfortable, right? It's easy when it's easy, but when it's not easy, that's when we are encouraged to be authentic. Yeah.
Yes, I love it. I resonate with all of it. Thank you for that. And I just jotted down some words that are related to authenticity. So truth, transparency, vulnerability, which you touched on, honesty, genuine or real, integrity. So, and then I also want to go over some things that we mistake for authenticity. So we think if someone's being charismatic, that means they're being authentic.
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily true. And then another one is people that are brutally honest are in general authentic.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to add to that, like authenticity, bridged with empathy, you know, because there's something about like being real and speaking truth. But if we are, if we're like skipping over the part of the empathy part of it, it will sort of like come off as, well, it is authentic, but bridging with empathy, I think that's a really important aspect of it as well. And love, the unity aspect of it. So we're expressing it, and we can also take accountability for ourselves, as you're saying. So it's beautiful.
Yes. Oh, I feel this is a good time to chime in here for kind of like my human design, the way I was built astrologically. So basically, what I'm known for is being connected but detached at the same time. You understand that saying?
Depending on the context, like, can you give
Okay.
an example?
Yeah. So, like, connected with my heart, connected with unity consciousness, but at the same time, I'm detached enough to realize that thoughts, words, beliefs, perceptions, they don't make me who I am. I'm detached from them.
Yeah. Yeah,
And so
yeah.
sometimes to people that actually suffer with great attachment, few people that are connected and attached to be inauthentic. And I've dealt with
Yeah.
this in my lifetime, seeing this, not specifically with me where people think that I'm inauthentic, but I've seen people view this kind of idea as, inauthentic. So it's really quite interesting. The kind of like cognitive distortions that we suffer from, and with our perceptions on what authenticity actually is.
Yeah, I guess it comes from like the opposite of authenticity is fear, or fakeness, right? And it comes from fear. And the way I see it is that as we grow up, we sort of create this inner shadow aspects, and that can be like labeled as shame, like inner child shame, inner child guilt, unworthiness, and we're trying to make up for that by creating other identities to sort of protect the vulnerable one, the hurt ones. And that's where the like perfectionist comes in to sort of hide the shameful one, or the people pleaser comes maybe in to hide the guilty one, right? And the insecure one, or the confident one, or the charismatic one can actually be hiding the insecure one. And that's why I would say like confidence is in some way, it can be authentic if it comes from like maybe more like
Self-esteem.
Self-esteem. Yeah,
Self-esteem. I say self-esteem is inward and self-confidence is outward. So just because someone has high self-confidence doesn't necessarily mean that they have high self-esteem.
definitely. It becomes like a fake layer to protect the pain, right?
Yes.
And I'm sure we can all have felt into this at some point in our lives, but as we start to become more aware or conscious, it becomes harder and harder to fake it. It's like we're being to be authentic, and we can see it in other people as well. And it's a reflection of us as well, because we're all doing it. It's a human conditioning in a way.
Exactly. So I love that you mentioned that. We're all doing it to some degree. And, I say this often, that anyone that says that they don't lie at all is most certainly lying, because, we operate in autopilot. I think they estimate 95% of the time on average. Obviously, it's different from person to person. But if we're operating on autopilot and we have dealt with external influences, society, programming, conditioning, how can we actually say that we're 100% authentic, or we 100% don't lie? No, exactly. It just doesn't. It's not very realistic in this world, at least.
Yeah, because the way I see it more and more is about we tend to create this idea about who we are, and then we present that to the world, and that's our role, like our social role or our career or some kind of persona that we live out, and that's ego identity. And that's not in of itself wrong, but if we're truly living from moment to moment, we can experience thoughts and emotions without the need to create an identity out of it. And that's when the inauthenticity comes, when we feel like we have to live up to maintain a persona that is actually not in aligned with what we're actually feeling in that moment, or what we're actually feels natural to express or experience in that moment, or at least that's my take.
I love that. And a part of me finding my authentic truth was also touching on the labels. And as soon as you said ego, I thought of labels. So I've learned to shed a lot of labels, even surrounding what I do for work. So originally I used to call myself a life coach, but I'm very aware of how labels make me feel. And I know that I've really, really healed a lot around that. And I know that obviously labels can be really helpful in terms of careers, so people have an idea of what you do, right? But for me, I knew I was getting carried away with the labels for a lot of years in my life. So there was a point in my life where I thought, okay, this would be a really good practice to remove all the labels and see if I can still feel worthy inside. And so I did this for a really long time. And then I started to notice that even when people would call me things like, you're a queen and you're amazing and you're just wonderful, all these like compliments and stuff, like it wasn't impacting me to a degree where I started to feel better than anyone or special, because the feeling of being special is actually stemming from ego, from fear, from not feeling whole. We all are unique, but that feeling of we need to be special is ego driven. And if you don't mind, I actually created a list to kind of help people to understand the difference between ego and higher self. Awesome. So first, maybe I'll get into my definition of authenticity. So I said to be authentic means to be in alignment with your soul by honoring your higher self, which leads me to get into ego versus higher self. And then here's the list that will help you identify what's what. So ego, separation, competition, chasing, blame, pride, jealousy, materialism, complaining, past future oriented, self-importance, hostility, and greed. And then higher self would be unity, collaboration, attracting, responsibility, love, happy for others, fulfillment within, gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. This has been huge in my life, so I'm just going to keep saying gratitude. Presence, we, importance, so encompassing others, being considerate of others, friendliness, and abundance.
Beautiful. I love that. I think it's important that at least it's been for me to see the ego like a pet, right? Like someone you need to like not push away or try to necessarily judge, because that's also the ego that is judging the ego, right? Something about integration and integrating it in a sense. So it's not how you're living, it's not what you're like, how you express yourself or how you experience life on a primary basis, but you can also be able to sort of integrate it when it shows up. And that's sort of the journey I think we're all on, like integrating that shadow aspects or those separate identities from everything else.
Yes, that's so important, making the shadows or the darkness or ego, whatever you want to call these things, part of the whole, not resisting them, not judging them, because what you resist persists. That's one thing I learned when I started learning about ego. I was taught like it's kind of like maybe demonic or like the devil, and I'm thinking I need to fight this thing off. I don't want this thing, but then I got more of it, of course. And then I had to start loving on it, making the connection as to why this ego developed in the first place. And I find that when we make the connections, it's easier for empathy to slide in for ourselves. We can have compassion and be like, that's not us. We were just programmed and conditioned. And now I can love on that now that I have that understanding and let it go and let it dissolve. Yeah.
I like to think of the ego not as a thing, but more as a mechanism that that is like like the blood is pumping in our bloods. We don't control it, but it happens, right? Or like the breath, it's like a mechanism that is happening that we can become aware of, and it makes us feel separate from everything around us and also from life itself. So yeah, that's something that we eventually, like, the shadow is coming from something that is being pushed away. So the moment we think we have a thing that we need to push away is the moment that it's actually being created, in a sense. So it's kind of ironic,
Yeah.
or upside down.
I know,
And
eventually you realize that ego's just an illusion.
yeah, exactly. You're trying to push away something that isn't really real anyway. So
I love it. So good. And then, yeah, I wanted to touch on integrity related to authenticity. So, in my opinion, integrity is walking the talk. And so this is also when we honor our inner guidance by taking action instead of letting fear take the driver's seat. I feel
yeah.
that's really, really important to know. Yeah, I think a lot of us don't really fully grasp what authenticity is. And not that anyone's definition is wrong. It's not about wrong or right, but I think when we tap into the heart, we come closer to this truth. That it's about living out what's true to your soul,
Yeah.
honoring that inner guidance that you receive from your higher self, taking action and accessing courage to take that action. And then, yeah, which brings me to say, being authentic requires courage, and for us to do the work to clear any fear, limiting beliefs, or lack mentalities.
Yeah, I feel like everything in the universe wants to be seen as it is. Like every emotion wants to be seen as felt as it is. Every thought actually also wants to be seen as it is. And it requires the courage, as you're saying, to actually face what is uncomfortable, in a sense. And that's also unconditional love, to sort of see everything as it is and move into like a state of non-resistance, where we can sort of flow with life. And then that's also how, like, the pain or suffering also is sort of vanishes or integrates, in a sense, when we don't resist it and we move with life instead of always against it, right? And that's the mind curse.
So true. Naturally, as we surrender and just start to view things as it just is, naturally everything will start to dissolve and become one.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Love that. And then, yeah, I noted that authenticity requires you to think for yourself, do the inner work, find out what you want to do, find out your strengths, shortcomings, and passions. And I find the shortcomings is very, very, very important when it comes to authenticity, because not even just in the career world, but also with any relationship, really, where there's collaboration, because that's what relationships are about, collaboration. And when we can be honest about our shortcomings, we can also kind of be like, okay, well, maybe that's your strength, so you can fill in here. And then where it's your shortcoming and it's my strength, I'll fill in those areas. Those are like really beautiful dynamics to get into. And I love discussing those kinds of things.
Yeah. And embracing that uniqueness, in a sense, as well. It's like, I don't know how, it really depends on cultures as well. But especially in my culture in Norway, it's very, very conform. That you're supposed to be like fit into this tiny little box. This is how you're supposed to be, and this is how you're supposed to live your life. And also that's how you're supposed to express yourself, or that's sort of like your career options and all of these labels. And you need to find your box to fit into, instead of designing your own box or no box, right? And I guess when you move out of the boxes, that is actually just in here, they don't actually exist in a reality. That's
solutions. I love it.
Fully express life in every area of life. And even the uniqueness, the strangeness, the things that is not necessarily socially common in from culture to culture, for example. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I guess part of authenticity is trying to find that balance. And so, my journey to being more authentic what I noticed was, so this is like 4.5 years ago when I got out of rehab, I started to clear up my vessel. I quit drugs, alcohol, and I started to notice that more of my psychic abilities were flourishing. And I started to be more in tune with the channel and receive wisdom from a higher power. And this has been really beautiful to experience. However, I do know that I am human and I still suffer with some blocks. So, in knowing that, I give myself permission, I allow myself to do things, for example, like this, where I bring something to alive and I have it more structured. But I know that there's this outlook that some people have where that's inauthentic, that's not true. They're not comfortable with being their true, authentic self. And I kind of want to really get into how, when we say these things to people and we're constantly pointing out what's inauthentic, it kind of perpetuates the inauthenticity. Whereas, okay, maybe we can acknowledge it, but how can we transition out of it? What are the things we can do to become more authentic? Because if that is our focus, then we're just going to keep being inauthentic, right? So, and I love to bring out the vulnerability in times of this where we're feeling judgmental, because that's really, really what helps people to become vulnerable with themselves and to step into their authenticity.
Absolutely. That's so beautiful. I'm thinking about what you're saying about now it actually slipped for a moment there.
Yeah. Soak it all in, girl. No rush at all.
Good. Beautiful. So I want to mention that, like, when we are like children, at least for me, I don't know if every child feels like this, but I suppose many children do, especially growing up maybe in these times. We feel that something is off about society. We feel like something is superficial, especially like in the mainstream media maybe, and looking at the adults and how sort of society is created. If we are born as highly sensitive or as empath, and we are naturally very like in a sense pure, and children are pure, they're more innocent, they haven't developed all these shadows or all the mind identities that we have as grown-ups, and we feel that something is off, but we don't trust it, and we start to abandon ourselves to fit in, and that's when we abandon the authenticity as well. And everyone is sort of doing it, or I believe most people are doing it at some point, but nobody really, like, we sort of just agree that nobody are authentic, but we're still like, all of us are pretending and hiding and proving and living this game, even though everyone are actually losing in the long run, in a sense. So yeah.
So true. And then I want to bring up this saying where it's fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
I used to actually implement this in my day-to-day life, especially when it came to work, career life. And, it did feel good to fake it. And maybe temporarily I felt better about myself. I was boosted. But overall, I still felt the lack within, the low self-esteem. And so instead of encouraging people to fake it until you make it, I've replaced it with face it until you make it. And it's little things like that where we can transition out of being authentic to authenticity. Yeah.
So I guess when we, at least in my experience, when we grow up and we are sort of told or conditioned to believe that we need to create a person, we need to create a persona, and we are spending maybe our whole lives building someone, like in form of a career or a family or a social role, until we start to become conscious or awakening, or however that journey unfolds. And it's almost like we're taking the U-swing and we're going the way back. We're peeling off the layers that we have put on to create a mask to show to the world. And we're taking it off and becoming more raw. And I like the word unfiltered and innocent, which is so, like, at least for me, like really expressing how this feels like. It feels unfiltered. It feels like there's no way for me to, or it gets harder and harder to keep the masks with others and with myself. I feel that's the most important part. The roles you pretend for yourself, and the way you're not authentic with yourself, which is like honesty as well, right? So there's something about doing the work alone with yourself first before you're ready to test yourself out in the real world as well.
Yeah. And I love that you noted to be honest with yourself, because everything starts within, right? So if we're not truthful with ourselves, we're not going to be truthful to others. If we don't love ourselves, we're not going to be able to love others. And I kind of want to ask, so when you're feeling like you need to have a filter and you're needing to hide a little bit, what are some things you do for yourself to step out of that and into authenticity?
I normally feel like the answer is actually to move into presence, into the present moment. And I usually do that through like the five senses. Just what can I hear? What can I see, smell, feel, and taste maybe? And see how then I get sort of aware. When you practice this, you start to learn what it means to be in your mind and out of your mind. And when you are not in the mind, you can sort of feel emotions as energy. You feel emotions as energy without, and you can detach from the story and leave the story behind and just feel the emotion. And to sort of process and do emotion work, I also like to use, I'm not sure what the English term is, but it's like this tapping a lot.
Oh, I do tapping, yeah, intuitive tapping. Beautiful.
This really releases your emotions. So
Definitely.
it detaches the story from the emotion. So you can now think about the story without emotion, and then you lose interest in the story as well. And you can just experience the emotion without the fear of moving through it. You're facing it, as you're saying. You're moving in it instead of trying to push it away and create a new story to escape it, and all of those, the mind game that we're playing with ourselves. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let yourself be down, then accept and try to move through it with your appropriate coping mechanism. And I love that, because it's, I don't really believe in the cookie cutter approach. And even personally for myself, I know of various different approaches, and I don't use the same one every single time. It's whatever I'm feeling called to or intuitively drawn to in that moment. So yeah.
Definitely.
Beautiful. And then actually, so one of my favorite ones to use is, this really helps me process, but I do like to get present first to start. And so I'll do some breath work, and that will vary from situation to situation. It might take only 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And then shortly after that, I like to journal and get into what it is I'm feeling. So like, I talk about what the exact emotions are, I address them, I acknowledge them, I validate them, I make the connections as to why I would be feeling this way. And then once I do that, I can reframe my victim story, we can call it. And then I turn it into an empowering story. And then after that, I like the integration process of either like dancing, doing some more breath work, just something to get the energy moving to integrate the new story.
Especially like the dance, the no rules, that's when you sort of break free from those the rules done and all of those stories that you're speaking about.
Oh, you cut out there. Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how I said it, but it's about something about like the movement, the flow, the doing something like that breaks the pattern, in a sense, that break the rules that you have created on how you should be and what you should do. Yeah, I love that.
And then, so I got into, so when we are authentic, we let go of the desire to follow the crowd, people please, blend in with society. Many want to find a good job and follow a predictable and stable path. Funny enough, though, the only constant in life is change. Yes, I always have a good laugh over that one. When we think we can predict the future, we know 100% that this is safe.
It's the control, right? We want to control how we are, and we also want to control how other people perceive us, which is a reflection of them, not necessarily us. So there's something about sort of empowering in the authenticity as well, and very, very liberating when you don't have to like the people please or prove or defend or hide or do all these things that we're doing to when we're inauthentic. And there's a freedom that comes with it, at least for me, when I allow myself to not be perfect, when I allow myself to not have it all figured out. And I noticed this when I started to awaken. I became very, very sensitive, and I started to feel a lot of anxiety, which is something that I was really, really, really ashamed of. So I got ashamed or anxiety for having anxiety. So I was really stuck in a loop of like hiding from life because I was so afraid of that showing up, and I never knew when or how or who that would happen with. It was really awful, and it lasted for about 6 months, the worst. And I remember how I moved out of it was actually just to allow myself to have anxiety, and just to allow myself, okay, I'm freaking out right now. Let's go. Let's see how worse it can be. How bad can it be? And it's never that bad, you know. Nothing can, like, the people that don't support this are not people that you should necessarily care about either, like their opinions, right? So it's something about like, okay, I'm failing now. I'm just going to have a free fall, see how it goes, and just go with it. And that's actually how I was able to let go of it. Just, okay, I'm feeling that anxiety now, and that was how I was able to release it in a sense as well, and to not resisting it. So yeah.
Yes. Oh, I love this. I resonate so much with this. So, you know, I'm an advocate for expressing yourself fully and completely, but that looks different for every single person, and it's also like dependent on the situation, what's going on. So one thing I really struggled with was crying. I thought it was weak. And so anytime I would want to express, we'll call ego, was very tricky, and would try and do anything but cry. So I would journal, I would do breath work, I would meditate, but no, I cannot cry because I can still release it another way. And what I actually realized was when I tap more into my heart is that's actually sometimes the only way for us to release it from the body. So just to allow yourself, give yourself that permission, and to release the judgment, fully embrace it, embody it.
As you also spoke about, it's something about the want to bypass and run away instead of facing it. And I feel like that's a huge, it's like a trap, but it's something that we will at some point fall into. So it's not something that we should create like a big judgment out of. But there's something about, like, at least for me, like at some point I wanted to move away from life because the awakening process was so intense, and I wanted alone time, and I had enough being on my own. But there's something about, like, at a point when you start to move into life instead, like as the new you, as the integrated you, like starting to face the things that are uncomfortable. Like when you don't want to cry, well, cry. When you don't want to feel anxiety, well, feel it, you know, to do the opposite of what you would normally do, to sort of break out of that stuckness that can sometimes be very prolonged. It can last for years if we don't just like go and face it and overcome it in a sense. So yeah.
Thank you for that. Super important. I'm just going to read a comment here. I know I really appreciate when I can see people not worried about how they appear, exist in all their humanness. Ultimately, we are here to be human. I love that. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Abby.
And we're all struggling with, you know, we're all trying to be authentic. We're all longing for authenticity, to be as we are. But there's this hidden agreement among us or society where it's not supposed to be that way. We're supposed to be confident and tough, always have it figured out. We're supposed to have this persona, and but we're all longing for taking that filter off, like deep within, right? Or I believe we do.
I truly believe that as well. I resonate with that. And okay, I'm just going to go off my notes here for a moment, but I thought it would be important to know, be aware of the mentality of, I don't care what people think. I will be me and no one can change me. I used to fall into this trap. And so just want to note that this is stemming from fear and separation. This is not unity consciousness. Unity consciousness is where true authenticity lives. When we are in unity consciousness, we are considerate of others and respect their journey, which includes their values, beliefs, and perceptions. This does not mean that we have to agree with them. This is just where we release the desire to fight them and manipulate them into aligning with our views or truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like there's a huge part there, like, at least for me, like moving into the frequency of love, which is acceptance of everything in a sense. And always like check with myself, is this in alignment with how I like what I feel is like is love? Is like to be me, to be vulnerable and to accept others, and also to be angry and like make mistakes, and sometimes we're not authentic, right?
Yeah.
So there's something about what is in alignment with love eventually, and sort of it doesn't have to be more complicated. It can be simple, actually. It can be very simple if we're just moving into what feels truth. And I feel like truth and love is somewhat in the same way, because truth doesn't hide or try to fix or control or change. It just is. And that's also love, because unconditional love allows everything in a sense. It allows everything. That's unconditional love. Because if it was, the universe was conditional love, we wouldn't have pain. We wouldn't have anger. We wouldn't have fear. We wouldn't have shame. We wouldn't have guilt and all these emotions as well, because it's unconditional love. So that these are also welcome in this whole existence that we're experiencing. So yeah.
Beautifully said. And I'm going to just read a quote right now that's kind of similar to what you just touched on. So, truth will never not be truth. Truth isn't afraid of dissenting information. Truth isn't triggered by others looking at other ideals. It is steadfast and patient. It will be there for when we are ready for it.
Beautiful.
And yeah, one more by Orwell. The further society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those that speak it.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to get into black and white thinking around authenticity. So, you know, I think a lot of us have this idea of either you're real or you're fake. It's one or the other. We don't have this gray area, right? It's just a cognitive distortion that we suffer from. But again, I'm just going to repeat that the truth is that all of us actually lie. I know, based on programming and conditioning, you know, we've
and ourselves,
yeah,
first and foremost.
100%. Yes.
Nice.
Yes, because it all starts within. So we start lying to ourselves, and then in turn we lie to others. Yes, that's where it stems from. Everything stems within. Beautiful.
It requires courage, and I feel like we're moving out of like an emotional, mental dark age of humanity. So it takes time and it takes practice, and it will take some time in that conventional sense, where we will fully and more embody these new energies and these new frequencies that so many of us are experiencing. And at some point, maybe when we wake up, we don't feel human. We don't feel like we belong. But there's something about what we really are is almost like we're trying to get out of life in a sense. But to realize that it's actually the other way around. It's that what we really are is trying to get in.
Yeah.
It's trying to get into this body and fully express it with all the things that we are actually trying to run away from. It wants to experience this, to learn contrast and duality and polarities, and sort of integrate that into the whole in a sense as well. At least that's how I experience it.
Yes, I definitely resonate with that. I'm just going to read a comment here. So many people, when awakening, try so hard to show they're not actually human. Awakening is unity, consciousness, love is the goal.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. Love it, love it. Just going to check in to see if there's any questions. No questions. All right. Any, did you want to touch on anything else before we wrap up here?
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to touch upon is how we all have our even though we are somewhat, we are struggling with the same things on a collective level, and also like you're never alone in what you're experiencing. Yeah. But at the same time, we have to sort of have an individual check with ourselves and see what's my issue, right? Where can I be more authentic? And for you, you said it was more about this is me, like being loud and proud, and that can be in an inauthentic way, as you mentioned. For me, it's more about allowing myself to be more loud and proud and not trying to people please. So it's the other way around. So it can be like fixations in either way, and that's where we have to be honest and create this balance in a sense.
Yes. So, yeah. What a great close. Thank you for that, Julie.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yeah, I just want to step into some gratitude here and thank everyone who joined today. What a wonderful discussion. Yes, the entire reason we are here, to feel, to embody. Yes, I love it. So much love to everyone. And yes, thank you to you, Julie. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I was like so super stoked. And I do have to say, your energy is quite beautiful. And it allowed me to feel safe during this whole conversation. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. I love this conversation. So
Yes.
yeah.
All right. Love you, Julie. Have an amazing day.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Ciao.